What's up, everybody? This is Steve Sterlacci, and today we are going to try to help you pick between the Fractal FM9 and the Neural DSP Quad Cortex. So in 2021, these are pretty much the only good things to come out of these last years. The Quad Cortex from Neural was announced at NAMM 2020 and kind of made a big wave at first with its hype and its marketing. They did a really good job of marketing it as the most powerful modeler on Earth and, making it a big deal with the touchscreen, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the FM9 from Fractal, which is now kind of the older brother to the successful FM3, and it fits nicely in the Fractal family. Now, for an apples to apples comparison to this tone-wise, these are literally two totally different units when it comes to how they create their sounds and how they get their sounds. The QC has modeling in it, but its main flagship feature is captures. And captures essentially are snapshots of real amps. So for example, I bought the QC literally just so I could take my vintage amps from home, send them through a load box, and put them in a unit and be able to have them with me on the road. Whereas something like the Fractal is just super, super advanced amp modeling. And you can get so fine-tuned with this in a great way and sometimes to a fault. So I think that's a gift and a curse with the Fractals. Comparing them side by side tonally is going to be a little bit of a difficult task. I don't want to do that because it really doesn't make sense because they kind of do different things, but the same thing at the same time. You know what I mean. To start the comparison, let's go right into the size and form factor. Obviously, QC takes the freaking cake with size and form factor. I mean, this thing is super tiny and super powerful for its size, whereas the FM9 is quite bulky and a lot bigger. The FM9 has 9-foot switches. The QC has 10. Well, I guess you can't count the two up and downs and the banks as switches, I guess. So we'll say that it has 8 usable foot switches. More on that later on. And don't let the size fool you of the QC. It is as powerful as can be. You could load this thing up with a stupid amount of amps, captures, effects, and it won't run out of DSP. It's actually really hard to hit the DSP limit with this. I've tried, and I've just thrown an obnoxious amount of stuff in things, and it's really hard to run out of DSP. So the Quad Cortex power-wise is really nice. The FM9 will run out of DSP if you use enough stuff. I know the reverbs, so you could continuously use the high-quality reverbs, are on their own DSP, and I think the amps are on their own DSP too. So you can run out of DSP a little bit easier on the FM9, but it's also not meant to be what the AXFX3 rack unit is. So that's something to consider. Next, I want to talk about effects in history. So obviously Fractal's been around a long time and they are well seasoned in this game. They have so many models, so many cabinets, so many effects that it's a little overwhelming, and they're all good. There's literally everything you could possibly think of in the Fractal units, but you are kind of limited in format. You can only have 2 drive pedals, 2 amps, 2 reverbs, 2 delays, and that's kind of stuck in that format. And now within each of those, you can have up to 8 channels if you use both. So each block will give you 4 channels. Versus the QC, which is totally open format. You can put as many of whatever you want throughout it. The big downer for the Quad Cortex is that it's lacking amp and effects currently. Compared to Fractal, it's only been around for a little bit. This is their first hardware unit. They have plenty of great plugins. And apparently at some point in the future, all we keep hearing is future, future, future. We are going to be getting plugin capabilities and more amps and effects. But right now, the amount of amps and effects built into the QC are seriously lacking relative to the Fractal. Let's talk quickly about the amount of time it takes to get a good tone. So I had the Quad Cortex first. I found with the QC, I had the easiest experience getting a tone dialed in. If you're making your own captures, it's awesome. You could just take your amp settings, plop them right in, and you're pretty much good to go with minimal tweaking. And I love that. The models even come up stock pretty good sounding. So I have a couple of preset build videos if you guys want to check those out for the Quad Cortex, if you want to see what the workflow looks like. And I'm up and running with a giggable preset with the Quad Cortex within hours of owning it, which I think is a real big plus. And now a minus for the Fractal. This thing has seriously been driving me nuts because I've had it for like 2.5 weeks and I'm still having a hard time getting it gig ready. It's not hard to get a good tone. The tone is great, but learning how to navigate everything through the FM9 edit, which is a fine thing. It's laggier and glitchier than HX edit for the Helix users out there. Having to do everything on the laptop is really frustrating. And the way that, I don't know if it's that it's so open that you have this whole grid and that you have to kind of put the shunts, you have to connect in to out, and you have to do all stuff that I feel like isn't necessary and kind of stresses you out when you're not used to it. And again, I'm speaking as a new user. I'm sure it'll be nothing after, a few months with it. It'll be, second nature. I wanted to think it all about it, but I wanted to make this for a first-time user experience, which I think is going to be most of you guys out there. But yeah, the tweakability of the Fractal is like option paralysis, because you can do so many things with just a basic amp and cabinet that, like, I can adjust a speaker impedance curve. Why? It's great that I could do that, but that's some stuff that I will never probably ever touch. And it kind of like backs you up and you're like, oh crap, like there's so much that you could do with this that you almost don't know where to start. But if you are a new user to this, just stick to the basics, go with the regular amp controls, and you'll be able to dial in great sounds without any trouble. And again, compared to the QC, if you're using captures, you just pull them up and it's the amp that you want. But the bad side to that is that on the cloud, there are already thousands and thousands of captures that people are uploading. So if you're looking for a specific type of amp, you are now at the mercy of the capturer, captor. You're at the mercy of the person that made the capture, which could be great. It could be terrible. A lot of the descriptions are not specific, which is really frustrating. So you could be spending hours and hours looking through captures, trying to find the right one, instead of just being able to pull up a model and tweak it the way you want it to sound and, be able to make your sound instead of hope for your sound, if that makes sense. So the big thing for me, and this is something that I took for granted with the Helix, is the on-gig editing. And this is something that no one really talks about, and something that's really important to somebody like me that makes my living as a touring guitar player. I need to be able to make adjustments on the fly, on the gig, and I need to be able to do it fast. In between songs, during songs, I need to be able to do this stuff really quickly. And I was a little bit overwhelmed with the process it takes to get these things tweaked live. I brought my laptop to rehearsal for the FM9, and I had my laptop next to me. So I was like, okay, if something bad happens, I know I can just go in here and I have to edit that. I don't want to have to do that. And I definitely can't do that on stage. So for the Fractal, you have what's called a performance page, which you can customize which knobs you want to be controlled, which I think is a really cool feature and one that I have to dive a little bit deep into. The bad part about that is you are limited to the 10 parameters that you put up there. So you can only have 10 adjustable parameters on board on the gig if you want to do it quickly. There are other ways where you can navigate on the unit, but it literally takes forever and is not even worth trying to do, in my opinion. And you also have global controls, so that I guess technically could give you 20 parameters that you can change on the fly just right here on the Fractal unit. But now where that gets you into trouble is, what if my parameter isn't one of those? Like, say for some reason, I feel like in general, and this is just something a new user stress, I would say, I'm worried that I would need to adjust more than 10 things at a time, which even saying it out loud is kind of nonsense. So I should be able to pick out my parameters carefully, things that I think I would need to adjust on the fly, probably like high cuts, low cuts, reverb and delay mix, maybe my solo boost volume. And that typically will be all I would need to adjust just off the top of my head. And I still have room to add other parameters that I can adjust, and they'll be right here on the unit. Whereas now when you're doing things on the fly on the QC, it's touchscreen, which is, it's not even close to, as difficult as the Fractal. You could just tap your pedal that you want to adjust, and you have your knobs, your encoder knobs, or you could use the touch screen. And it's as simple as literally, I want to adjust this, I tap it, I adjust it, and then I'm done. So I'm definitely going to give that to the QC, but now it's going to flip-flop in terms of the layout of the gigging functions here. So when you're in a gigging mode, you want to call it gigging mode on the Quad Cortex, you have to swipe up to this screen where it has your scenes laid out, your scenes, your presets, or your stomp boxes, and you're pretty much now done. You can't do anything else from here. You can only do one or the other, which is pretty frustrating. But if you have your scenes dialed in properly could be great for gigging and really easy to use. And now to adjust out of this though, I have to actually tap close, and then I have to go to the parameter, find it, and then adjust it and then swipe up. Still easier than the Fractal, I believe, but there is no way to make a hybrid mode yet. Apparently this is an update. It's going to be coming. We'll see. I don't know. I'm hoping so, where you can make this a hybrid where you can put stomp boxes, presets, or scenes in one format here, instead of having to double tap the two switches to get to pedal board mode, turn your pedal on, turn your pedal off, and then double tap these again to get back to the scene mode. It's really confusing and it's really annoying to have to do that. Also, while we're on that, on the actual gig view on the Fractal, you have pretty much full customization in a per preset way or a global way. And per preset just means literally what it says. That was a confusing term for me for a while, but per preset means in this preset, here's what it's going to look like and here's what it's going to do. And you can pretty much customize this to do whatever you want. Each foot switch has a tap and a hold function, which basically means that you can have each foot switch control two different things. And it's really lethal in its flexibility this way. Fractal's really done their homework, and they're really, really well and good on the gigging experience when it comes to that. You know, being able to tap and hold functions, you double your foot switching capabilities. And I think that's a huge, huge thing for this. And it can be an open format. They have a lot of suggested layouts, but you can customize your format to be exactly what you want it to be in a per preset way or a global way. Okay, so you've heard me talk about scenes a lot. Scenes are in both of these units and they are kind of the same thing. Scenes, we'll say, are you able to have a preset within your preset where things can be turned on and off, parameters can be changed. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You could turn things on and off, you could change parameters, you could do whatever you want with just one button press. So you basically assign a bunch of different controls and commands to one button, you press it, a bunch of things happen. Could be as little or as much as you want in some cases. And that's where I'm gonna edge Quad Cortex here, because the scene mode on Quad Cortex is similar to Helix, where you can almost do any parameter per scene. Meaning I can adjust bass, middle, treble, gain, volume, turn delays on and off. I could do so much parameter-wise on the QC, which I really, really like. And the downside of the Fractal is that you only have 4 scene controllers. And what scene controllers are, that's how you change a parameter. So you literally can only change 4 parameters across an entire preset, whereas the QC, you can change pretty much all of your parameters across your scenes. So in that way, the QC becomes infinitely more flexible than the FM9 in terms of scenes. But as far as bypassing assignments and changing things up, they'll be just about the same there as well. Oh, and another thing about scenes, while we're on scenes, they're all seamless switching things. So whenever you have scenes in both of these units, each change will be completely seamless. So that means that there'll be no gap in audio. It's not like when you're changing channels on an amp and there'll be a noticeable glitch. That, however, is another thing that I'm going to edge the QC on, because you can put 2 amplifiers in a signal chain, have them bypass back and forth and toggle your amps. You can add 4 amps if you wanted to, because it can handle the DSP. And you can seamlessly switch between those amps on the Quad Cortex with no gap. Currently on the FM9, and there are ways to work around this that I haven't yet gotten my head around. And I've been reading that people use different ways to do this. So if you're an Axe user, you can help me out and let me know how to go about getting seamless amp switching in the FM9. You can do 2 amp blocks. So you are limited to amp blocks, but each amp block has 4 channels, but there is no seamless switching between channels. So you can switch from amp 1 to amp 2 seamlessly, but you can't switch from amp channel A to channel B, C, or D without having a noticeable gap. And by the way, if you are a Fractal user, you should look into these screen protectors from Chad Boston. He actually has them for both, but these really cool magnetic screen protector goes right on there. And actually, it looks like it was made for the FM9. Like, I think that looks really cool on there. I don't have one for the QC. I kind of like the way the QC looked. This, to me, I saw that pictures online and I was like, I got to have that. So I bought these from Gear by Seba, if you want to check them out. Not sponsored in any way, just Chad's a good friend of mine and want to help him out. So check out Gear by Seba if you want any accessories for these units. So some other things we can touch on. Powering up the Quad Cortex is a little bit annoying because once it sees power, it turns on. Don't understand why they would do this instead of making it a switch to actually turn on, but it is what it is. The power supply is also very cheap, it almost feels like a regular pedal power supply. And for a unit like this, I feel like I'd like something a little bit more reliable than just like a regular barrel plug here. So that makes me nervous for this to be pulled out and for the wire to fail. It's this really thin wire. I would prefer an IEC cable personally, whereas the FM9, good old IEC cable, pop it in, it's firm, it's stuck in there, and it's not gonna fall out. Another thing that the QC is totally lacking is a desktop editor. As of now, and again, they keep saying soon every time you ask about it, we have no desktop editor for the QC. You have to do everything on board, which is very, very frustrating and very annoying, especially as someone who wants my floor unit to be on the floor so I can edit up here. And then, on the gig, it's fine, but editing at home, I want to use a desktop. FM9 has a great desktop editor, works really fine. I prefer editing on a desktop editor. Let me know what you prefer. Okay, so I think that's a pretty solid comparison so far. I've rambled long enough about these two things. So as an overall summary, the FM9 is capable of some of the best tones you'll ever get in your life. If you want to put the time into learning how to do it, learning how to navigate the unit, and basically you have to fully engulf yourself in the manual and YouTube videos and spend a lot of time. So when they say you need a degree to use a Fractal product, it's pretty true. Unless you want to go for basics, if you want to get as advanced as you want, it's probably worth the time that you put into it. I certainly am investing that time currently, but I'm not totally there yet, and it's been frustrating. If you're somebody that just wants to grab, go, plug and play, then the Quad Cortex is an amazing unit because having the captures all just dialed in, ready to go, I think that's awesome. It sounds better once you pull things up. It sounds good, ready to use within a few hours. Overall, I think the Quad Cortex is easier, and I think they could both sound just as good depending on how good you are at dialing them in. All right, so that is the video comparing the FM9 and the Quad Cortex. Thank you guys so much if you made it this far. Let me know what you'll be choosing, what you have, and what you guys would want to try in the future more. I look forward to hearing you guys' feedback on what you think is best, and thank you guys for sticking around this far. I will see you in the next one.